by Kenneth Graham, picking up where we left off last night. And in the future, we will be moving the readings to the channel CrispySkates Bedtime Stories after this book. All right, let's dive in. Okay, Toad, you don't really. Someday, when it's too late, you'll be sorry you didn't value them more while you had them. I am an ungrateful beast, I know, sobbed the toad, shedding bitter tears. Let me go find them out in the cold, dark night and share their hardships and try and prove by hold on a bit. Surely I heard the chink of dishes on a tray. Supper's here. At last, hooray! Come on, Ratty. The rat remembered that poor Toad had been on prison fare for a considerable time, and that large allowances had therefore to be made. He followed him to the table accordingly, and hospitably encouraged him in his gallant efforts to make up for the past privations. They had just finished their meal and resumed their armchairs when they came up a heavy knock on the door. Toad was nervous, but Rat, nodding mysteriously at him, went straight up to the door and opened it, and walked in Mr. Badger. He had all the appearance of who, for some nights, had been kept away from home and all its little comforts and conveniences. His shoes were covered with mud, and he was looking very rough and tousled. But then he had never been as smart as very smart man, the badger at the best of times. He came solemnly up to the toad, shook him by the paw, and said, "Welcome home, Toad. Alas, what am I saying? Home, indeed, this poor homecoming, unhappy Toad." Then he turned his back on him, sat down at the table, drew up his chair, and helped himself to a large slice of cold pie. The toad was quite alarmed at this very serious, portentous style of reading, but the rat whispered to him, "Never mind. Don't take any notice, and don't say anything to him just yet. He's always rather despotent when he's wanting his victuals. In half an hour's time, he'll be quite a different animal." So they waited in silence, and presently there came another and a lighter knock. The rat, with a nod to the toad, went to the door and ushered in the mole, very shabby and unwashed, with his bits of hay and straw sticking in his fur. "Hooray! Here's old Toad," cried the mole, his face beaming. Fancy having you back again." And he began to dance around him. "We never dreamt that you would turn up so soon. Why, you must have managed to escape, you clever, ingenious, intelligent Toad." The rat, alarmed, pulled him by the elbow, but it was too late. Toad was puffing and swelling already. "Clever? Oh no," he said. "I'm not really clever. According to my friends, I've only broken out of the strongest prison in England, that's all, and captured a railway train and escaped on it, that's all, and disguised myself and gone about the country, humbugging everybody, that's all. Oh no, I'm a stupid ass, I am. I'll tell you one or two of my little adventures, Mole, and you shall judge yourself. Hello, George. It's nice to see you back. Thank you for watching. Well, well, said the mole, moving towards supper table. Supposing you talk while I eat. Not a bite of breakfast. Oh my. He sat down and helped himself liberally to a cold beef and pickles. Toad straddled on the hearth rug, thrust his paw into his trousers pocket, and pulled out a handful of silver. Look at that, he cried, displaying it. That's not so bad, is it, for a few minutes of work? And how do you think I'd done it, Mom? Horse stealing, that is. I've done a horse stealing. Go on, Toad, said the mole, immensely interested. By the way, you guys, George is a content creator too, I believe. I think I know him. And if not, we're going to. And I'm so glad that you're watching. Thank you for coming back. Toad, to be quiet, please, said the rat. And don't you egg him on, Mole, when you know what he is. But please tell us soon as possible what that position is and what's the best thing to be done now that Toad is back at last. The position's about as bad as it can be, replied the mole grumpily. As for what's to be done and why, blessed if I know. The badger and I've been round and round by the night and day, and always the same thing. Sentries posted everywhere, guns poked out at us, stones thrown at us, always an animal on the lookout. And when they see us, my, how do they laugh? That's what annoys me the most. It's very difficult situation, said the rat, reflecting deeply. But I think I see now, in the depths of my mind, what Toad really ought to do. I will tell you. He ought to. No, he ought nothing, shouted the mole with his mouth full. Nothing of the sort. You don't understand. What he ought to do, is ought to. Well, I shan't do it anyway, cried Toad, getting excited. I'm not going to be ordered about by you fellows. It's my house we're talking about, and I'm not exactly what to do. I'll tell you, I'm going to. By this time, they were all three talking at once at the top of their voices, and the noise was simply deafening. When a thin, dry voice made itself heard by saying, "Be quiet at once, all of you." And instantly everyone was silent. Hello, Cinnamon Roll. What a cool name. I love that. And I like your little cinnamon roll guy. He's cute. It was Badger, who had fished his pie and turned around from his chair and was looking at them severely. When he saw that he had been secured their attention and they were evidently waiting for him to address them, he turned back to the table again and reached out for the cheese. And so was great the respect commanded by the solid qualities of the admiral animal that not another word was uttered until he had quite finished his repast and brushed the crumbs from his knee. The toad fidgeted a good deal, but the rat held him firmly down. When the badger had quiet done, he got up from his chair and stood before the fireplace, reflecting deeply. At last he spoke. "Toad," he said severely, "you bad, troublesome animal. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? What do you think of your father? My old friend would have said if he had been here tonight and had known of all of your going on. Toad was on the sofa by this time with his legs up, rolled over his face, shaking by sobs of contrition. There, there, went the badger, more kindly. Never mind. Stop crying. We're going to let bygones be bygones and try and turn over a new leaf. But the mole says is quite true. The stoats are on guard at every point, and they make the best sentinels in the world. It's quite useless to think of attacking the place. They're too strong for us. Then it's all over, sobbed the toad, crying into the sofa. I shall go an endless soldier and never see my dear Toad Hall any more. Come, cheer up, Toady, said the badger. There are more ways of getting back a place than taking it down by storm. I haven't said my last word yet. Now I'm going to tell you a great secret. Toad sat up slowly and dried his eyes. Secrets had an immense attraction for him because he never could keep one, and he enjoyed all sort of unhallowed thrill he experienced when he went and told another animal after having faithfully promised not to. Naughty Toad. There's an underground passage, said the badger, impressively, that leads to the and from the riverbank, quite near here, right up into the middle of Toad Hall. On nonsense, badger, said the toad airily. You've been listening to some of the yarns they spin in the public houses about here. I know every inch of Toad Hall, inside and out. Nothing of the sort, I do assure you. My young friend, said the badger with great severity, your father, who was your worthy animal, a lot worthier than some animals I know, was a particular friend of mine and told me a great deal he wouldn't have dreamt of telling you. He discovered that passage. He didn't make it, of course. That was done hundreds of years before he ever came to live there. And he repaired it and cleaned it out because he thought it might come in useful one day. In case of some trouble or danger, he showed it to me. Don't let my son know about it, he said. He's a good boy, but very light and volatile in character and simply cannot hold his tongue. If he's ever to real effects, and it would be of use to him, you may tell him about this secret passage, but not before. The other animals looked hard at Toad to see how he would take it. The toad was inclined to be scully at first, but he brightened up immediately, like a good fellow was. Well, well, he said, perhaps I'm a bit of a talker, a popular fellow such I am. My friends get me around. We chaff, we sparkle, we tell witty stories, and somehow my tongue gets wagging. I have the gift of conversation. I've been told I ought to have a salon, whatever it may be. Never mind. Go on, Badger. How's the passage of yours going to help us? I've found out a thing or two lately, continued the Badger. I've got Otter to disguise himself as a sweep and call at the back door with brushes over his shoulder asking for a job. There's going to be a big banquet tomorrow night. It's somebody's birthday. The chief weasels, I believe. And all the weasels will be gathered together in the dining hall, eating and drinking and laughing and carrying on, suspecting nothing. No guns, no swords, no sticks, no arms of any sort whatever. But the centennials will be posted as usual, remarked the rat. Exactly, said the badger. This is my point. The weasels will trust entirely to their excellent centennials, and that is where the passage comes in. That very useful tunnel leads right up under the butler's pantry next to the dining hall. Aha! That squeaky board under the butler's pantry, said the toad. Now I understand it. We shall creep out quietly into the butler's pantry, cried the mole. With our pistols and our swords and our sticks, shouted the rat. And rush upon them, said the badger. And whack 'em and whack 'em and whack 'em, cried the toad in ecstasy, running around the room and jumping all over the chairs. Very well, then, said the badger, resuming his usual dry manner. Our plan is settled, and there's nothing more for you to argue or squabble about. So, as it's getting very late, all of you go right off to bed at once, and we will make necessary arrangements in the course of the morning tomorrow. Toad, of course, went to bed dutifully with rest. He knew better than to refuse, though he was feeling much too excited to sleep. But he had a long day, with many events crowded into it. And the sheets and the blankets were very friendly and comforting things. After plain straw and too much of it, spread on the floor of the darty cell, and his head upon many seconds his pillow before he was dropped, snoring happily. Naturally, he dreamt of a good deal about roads that ran from him just as he wanted them, and canals that chased and caught him, and a barge that sailed into a banqueting hall with his week's washing, just as he was giving a dinner party, and he was alone in the secret passage, pushing onwards. But it was twisted and turned around and shook itself and sat up on its end. Yet somehow, at the last, he found himself back at Toad Hall, safe and triumphant, with his friends gathered round about him, earnestly assuring him that he really was a clever toad. All right, guys, I think that's a nice note to end it on. I have a tiny sleeper. I hope you all have wonderful dreams. Keep it crispy. Peace out.